As a lot of you'll know, in April, Corvus Belli released the Syenann faction, the Wood Elves, for Warcrow, and honestly they are some of the most gorgeous sculpts that I've seen in a long time. Within the pack comes 10 individual miniatures, including a druid. The druid is a special character for, or a leader, let's say, for the Syenann faction. They are essentially wood elves that are in, I mean, Beasts of Wars have described them already as a glass cannon in Warcrow, but they are shock tactic troopers, designed to come out of the shadows, attack, and then drift away again. And they've got some of the most stunning leaf-style bark armour. Now, as you've seen so far, the Corvus Belli team have painted these Warcrow Syenann as like a really greeny, leafy, foresty colour. So I challenged Harry this week to do something a little bit different and go for some autumnal colours, because I mean, in New Zealand at the moment, we're autumn into winter, the exact opposite to everywhere else in the world at the moment. So he's gone for a little bit more of a brown autumnal colour, and I'll let him tell you the rest. Welcome to the Distant Vale.
Welcome back to the Distant Vale. You've got Harry here again, taking through another little step-by-step painting. Not so much tutorial, more of just a how I like to colour stuff in, and you can follow along or critique as you feel you want to. We've got one of the protectors of the forest archer models from the Syenann, I think they say it, faction from Warcrow. So these are your sort of typical forest elves. And I'm going to go with a bit of a slightly different take on the colour scheme. The classic box art is that very rich greens, blues and yellows, so very summery colours, and I'm looking for something a little bit more autumnal. So we're going to spray some magenta ink over a black prime, and then zenithal on top of this to help build up a little bit of punch with the following colours, which is going to be a rich orange. And then we're going to top this up with a little final spray of a bright yellow to really give us this lovely transition from sort of a high saturation yellow down to a deep rich purple magenta. And with that final yellow highlight done, you can see here we've got this lovely transition from a rich warm yellow down to a nice earthy magenta purple. Now the next thing we're going to do after getting these sort of highlights sorted out is I want to come back through and sort of punch up those shadows a little bit. So I'm going to mix up a 50-50 ratio of magenta ink to a royal purple. Run that through the airbrush and just hit those places where the shadows will be collecting on the model. Now that we've got the base colouring and sort of pre-colouring done, I'm going to come through and start filling in the rest of the base tones on the model. So for the skin, I'm using a tanned flesh shade from the Army Painter, and we're just going to come through and do a couple of thin coats just everywhere we can see a bit of skin. Now I'm not too worried about being tidy around the wood elements on this model because we will be coming through and covering those up. However, I'm wanting most of the armor, a lot of brown tones here, so I've got a good lineup of about 3 or 4 warm brown tones. And the first one I'm going to use here is the Spec Ops Brown, one of the limited run Army Painter paints that came out with the Infinity starter sets. And I'm using this just to paint in the leather elements. So this is going to be the boots and a couple of little pouches, as well as the quiver for the arrows. Right, next step, we're going to take a Mournfang Brown from Citadel. And you're going to see on the palette here that whilst Spec Ops Brown, Mournfang Brown, and the other browns we're going to use later on are all browns, on the palette you can already see that the Mournfang has a slightly more yellow tint to it, and is a little less desaturated, has a little more punch compared to the Spec Ops Brown. And this is going to be really good for adding a bit of visual interest to a model which otherwise has a lot of the sort of same tones. So this Mournvein brown is going to be used primarily on the bow and the arrow shafts. And then finally, we're going to get some Rhinox hide from Citadel. This is going to be our darkest and our sort of most punchy brown. And we're going to use this primarily on the wooden branch or the wooden tree trunk that this archer is sitting on. And then again, you can see on the palette here just those differences in tone and intensity between these three browns, whilst all falling within that family of warm browns. They do give a nice bit of variation on the model. Next step, we're going to bring in some Administratum Grey. So this is a very, very desaturated blue-grey, and we're going to be using this as a base color for the archer's hair, and we will be highlighting this up to a near pure white. And the reason why I'm going for this sort of less realistic hair tone is I want it to stand out quite a lot on the model. We've got a lot of very samey warm tones on this model, and having something a little bit cooler and quite desaturated is going to make it stand out quite strongly, especially on the tabletop where, you know, from a couple meters back, all you're going to see is this bright pop of white on a model primarily in warm sort of autumn colors. And with the hair done, that's most of the base colors sorted. And you can already see just how much that hair pops compared to the rest of the model. And this is just having a little bit of basic sort of color theory understanding does make making a more interesting model a bit easier. So the next step here is we want to try and tie some of these browns and the skin tone together. And for that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a budget wash using the royal purple that we included in the underspraying or sort of shadow airbrushing that we did way back at the start. And the recipe for this wash is a 50-50 mix of the paint color to paint medium, and we're going to add a little bit of flow improver for an airbrush into the paint just to break that surface tension and allow us to have a little bit more control on how much we're adding there by letting that wash run a lot more aggressively into those recesses and really not pull as much on those higher surfaces. And with that wash dried, you can see everything has that slight purple tint to it. So it's just reading a bit more consistent with the rest of the model. And so now we're going to come back through with the original base colors, and we're just going to start to highlight up the skin and the different leather areas. Now with this highlighting step, we're going for big, chunky highlights. Don't be afraid to cover a little bit more than you think you need to on this. We really want that purple wash to be only sitting in the deepest recesses on the model.
Hello, it's me again. Fancy meeting you here. I seem to always be popping up in these videos. Thanks so much for watching so far, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe, does us a massive favour. If you'd like to see more Infinity or Warcrow content, drop us a comment below, and a massive thank you to Corvus Belli for sending us through this action pack for us to paint.
With that first chunky highlight placed down on the skin, we're now going to start mixing up our highlight color. Now, instead of using a white and desaturating the skin tone, what I'm actually going to do is bring in that Uriel yellow from Citadel, or that sort of rich yellow that we used in the airbrush final highlighting step. And we're going to mix that into this skin tone and use that as our highlight. And what this is going to do is it's going to help read the highlight a bit more consistently with the parts of the model that we haven't put a different base color on. And it will also make sure that when we're looking at this model from a sort of arm's length or tabletop distance, it's all reading very similar, and it won't clash so much compared to using a more desaturated white color to provide the highlight. Right, the next thing I'm going to try to tackle here is getting some war paint down on the face now that we've done the highlights. And so what I'm doing here is I'm coming back in with the Rhinox hide. I'm going to paint in some fairly big patches of dark brown, giving the impression of some shadow around the eyes. And we're going to be using this as a way to draw some attention to the different aspects of the face. Right, time to watch me struggle with every painter's favourite aspect of painting a face, which is trying really hard to be neat and dotting in the whites of the eyes. Now with these models, I'm not going to be bothering to paint in pupils. You can see me trying it here, but I just don't like how it ends up looking towards the end, and I cover it back up with just some pure white. With the base sort of makeup layer done and the whites of the eyes dotted in, what I'm going to do is mix up a very pale mix of the highest highlight on the skin tones. I'm just going to use this to come in, draw a little bit more detail, draw more attention to the sharper facial details. So this is a much more restrained sort of final highlight across the model, just to make sure that we are drawing the eye in to the parts of the model that I want being seen, and away from those other parts of the model which are maybe not quite as interesting. And with the skin finished up, I'm going to come back through for the rest of the browns on the model. So I'm taking that original Spec Ops brown. I'm just going to start to do that first highlight on the leather elements of the model. So this is again the quiver and the leather pants and boots. And then we're going to mix in a little bit of that Ural yellow and use that as our second highlight before finally adding a little bit of a very desaturated beige, so that's a grey matter beige from the Army Painter to do our final highlight. And I'm now just going to rinse and repeat this step for the other browns on the model, which would be the Rhinox hide for the original sort of the branch that she's sitting on, and then finally the Mournfang brown for the bow and the arrows. And then the last step of highlights is going to be coming in with a pure white and then highlighting up on the hair and the sort of the metal tip of the arrow. Right, now that the highlighting is done, I wasn't too happy with how the shaved sides of the head looked. It just came across too much like the hair color, so I'm just going to take some of that original tanned flesh and I'm going to thin it right on down. I'm going to use this as a little bit of a glaze to reintroduce some skin tone over top of the Administratum Grey. And what I'm hoping this will do is, again, from that arm's length tabletop distance, help it read more as stubble rather than white hair. And then we're going to take some dark tone from the Army Painter, thin it down a little bit, and use this as a wash just to darken the hair a little bit. I think I went a little too aggressive on the highlights on the top of the head there, and I've lost some of the detail. And this thinned down dark tone will just help to re-establish some of the finer details on the top of the hair. We're nearing the end of the painting steps here, and the last thing I really want to do here is do a little bit of a highlight on the sort of cloak and other parts of the model we haven't yet painted. And because we've already done a lot of the highlighting with the airbrush back at the start, all I need to do here is come through with a brightened up tone of that original yellow that we were using. So I've mixed in some of the brain matter beige into that Ural yellow, mixing that up, and I'm just running that along the edges of the armor panels. And then after I've done that a little bit on the bigger areas, I'm going to come through with a dry brush of the same color and just very, very lightly applying it across the highest of the armor plates, just to really pick up the edge detailing on the areas I want to draw as much attention to as possible. And with that, we're all pretty much done here. Always going to get a last looper in. But hey, no harm, no foul. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Really appreciate the support, and I'm looking forward to getting a few more cool models out of James later on in the year. Cheers!